Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired federal agent buys a forgotten piece of land for a quiet life, he doesn't expect war. But when a powerful HOA tries to erase him through lies, forged documents, and midnight raids, he fights back with drones, law, and a burning sense of justice. This is no suburban drama. When I first laid eyes on the land, it was nothing but dry wind, a weathered gate hanging on rusted hinges, and 5,000 acres of solitude whispering my name. Most people would have seen abandonment, ghosts of cattle fences, a barn roof collapsed like a crushed beer can, no cell signal unless you stood on a rock with one arm raised to the sky like a sacrifice. But me, I saw freedom. Not the kind they sell you with flag bumper stickers and lawn signs, but the real kind. The kind that smells like dry sagebrush, diesel fuel, and a second chance. After 28 years with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I'd had enough. Enough of meetings about meetings, enough of politics pretending to care about conservation, and definitely enough of strip mall suburbs smothering every square inch of what used to be open range. So I bought this place at a federal land auction for what most folks in the Elk Hollow Preserve spend on landscaping in a year. That's not an exaggeration. Their HOA dues alone could fund a small-town library. Mine, zero. Because my land isn't part of any damned association. The previous owners, a bankrupt agricorp out of Nebraska, had defaulted hard, left the property rotting after their water rights dried up, and their accountants ran off with whatever wasn't nailed down. Their loss, my redemption. Along with the land came the mineral rights, limited water use from the creek that slices across the western edge, and most importantly, a private road easement that snakes past the fancy gates of Elk Hollow and up to my southern ridge. Legally recorded, federally approved. A beautiful loophole for a man like me. I moved in with my dog, Scout, a 12-year-old blue heeler who's better company than most humans. We set up camp in what used to be the foreman's cabin, now refurbished with solar panels, a backup generator, and a satellite link fast enough to file court motions, which, as it turns out, I'd soon need. 2 days after I brought the horses in and locked the new steel gates behind me, they came. A white Tahoe, county sheriff logos on the side. 2 uniforms stepped out, one older, probably ex-military like me, and a younger one who looked like he still got ID'd buying beer. I met them halfway down the dirt path, clipboard already in hand. Scout stood beside me, tail stiff, ears perked, like he smelled bullshit before it spoke. "You Calvin Broxton?" the older deputy asked. "Sure am," I said. "Something wrong." "We received a report of potential unlawful occupation of private land," he said, "and unpermitted construction." I stared at them, then let out the kind of laugh that doesn't reach your eyes. "Let me guess," I said. "Came from the HOA next door?" They didn't answer. Instead, the younger one glanced at his partner like maybe this wasn't going to be as straightforward as their dispatch report suggested. I held up a folder. "Gentlemen, this is the deed, stamped by the federal auction house. Here's the land use map from the Department of the Interior. And here," I flipped to the page like a magician with a deadly card trick, "is the county zoning declaration from 2003, which clearly shows that this parcel is not, and never has been, under HOA jurisdiction." They studied the documents for a while, flipping through like they were hoping to find a gotcha clause hiding in the margins. But there wasn't one. I made damn sure of that before I ever put in a bid. "Looks legitimate," the older one finally said, turning to his partner. "No active warrants, no pending code violations from the county." The younger guy nodded, clearly disappointed. "Guess that's it then." Or so I thought. As they turned to leave, the older deputy hesitated. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This was handed to us by a Ms. Heidi Tronger," he said, "president of the Elk Hollow HOA. She asked us to deliver it." I opened it. A single sentence, typed, underlined. "The Elk Hollow HOA will consider all unapproved activity within visual proximity to our boundary as a breach of community code, subject to legal action." Below it, a signature in looping, overly confident, cursive, "Heidi Tronger, HOA president." I laughed again, this time louder. "Community code doesn't apply outside the community," I said. "Just doing our job," the deputy said with a shrug. They left, tires kicking up dust, and I stood there, paper in hand, watching the cloud settle. Scout looked up at me. "Looks like they don't teach land law at the HOA orientation," I muttered. He wagged his tail once and pissed on the nearest cactus like he had the final word. I burned the letter in the fire pit that night. I figured if that was their opening move, they were either bluffing or incredibly dumb. Either way, I didn't realize then how far they'd be willing to go. But I would. Soon. A few days passed after the sheriff's visit, and for a moment, I let myself believe that might have been the end of it. I kept working, dug the trench for the new water line, reinforced the corral, mounted trail cameras along the ridge. The weather held clear, crisp mornings, and brutal midday sun, but nothing I wasn't used to. Scout chased field mice, slept in the shade, and stayed smarter than most politicians I've met. Then I found the barricade. It was early, just after dawn. I was taking the northern route to haul in some lumber from a supplier out of Torrington. That road, an old gravel access path, cut through the edge of a federal easement, ran past the Elk Hollow development's backside, and twisted down into the northern mouth of my property. It had been open and unused for years, legal, documented, and surveyed twice over, except now it was blocked. Two concrete Jersey barriers sat squarely across the road with bright orange cones and a sparkling new sign bolted between them. It read, "Private Road, Property of Elk Hollow Preserve, HOA, No Through Access." I stared at it, sipping coffee from my thermos, half expecting a prank camera crew to pop out of the bushes. But no, this was real. Someone had gone through the effort of hauling concrete onto federal easement land and declaring it theirs. I turned the truck around and took the long route home, added 45 minutes to my drive, and left me with a bad taste that not even coffee could wash out. Back at the cabin, I sat at my desk and opened the land records database for Goshen County. That road wasn't supposed to belong to anyone. It had been listed under BLM administration since the Eisenhower era. I found the parcel ID, opened the latest recorded files, and there it was, freshly updated less than 72 hours ago. A temporary custodial management agreement listing Elk Hollow HOA as a designated steward of Parcel 33 pending county review. It had a signature from a deputy clerk I'd never heard of. And worse, a digital sign-off from the former county surveyor, a guy named Randall Hobbs, who had left office and left the country back in April. The signature block said it was authorized last week. Dead men, or expatriated ones, don't usually sign zoning paperwork. That's when my gut twisted. I didn't panic. I took screenshots, lots of them. Then I printed everything, highlighted inconsistencies, and added it to the growing HOA Insanity folder that now had its own filing drawer. I drove into town the next morning to speak with someone at the county assessor's office, but the clerk at the front desk gave me the usual small-town smile with big city evasion. "Sir, if the road's in review status, I'm afraid it's out of our hands for now." "And who submitted the review request?" I asked. "I'm not authorized to release that." "Well," I said, pulling out a copy of my deed, "you'll want to authorize someone because unless your office just turned over federal infrastructure to a homeowners association, we've got a problem." That got her to flinch, but not enough to be useful. I left my number, asked for a supervisor, and walked out. 2 hours later, I got a call, not from the assessor's office, but from the Elk Hollow HOA general line. I didn't pick up. They left a voicemail. "Hello, Mr. Broxton, this is Gabriel with the Elk Hollow Preserve Administration Office. We understand there's been some confusion about road access near your northern entrance. As a courtesy to the safety and aesthetics of our residents, we've temporarily closed that segment for maintenance. Please contact our legal liaison if you have questions. Thank you." Maintenance on federal land they don't own. Scout was chewing a deer antler by the fireplace as I replayed the message, louder this time. He didn't look impressed. Neither was I. By that evening, someone had also erected trail cameras on trees near the closed road. Not mine. Mine are camouflaged and motion-triggered. These were obvious, mounted with metal clamps and aimed squarely at my access gate. I walked up to one and stared at it long enough to feel the whir of its lens adjust. I gave it a nice long middle finger and walked away. The next day, a delivery truck got stuck trying to reach my barn via the long route, nearly slid off the path near the creek crossing. The driver cussed me out like it was my fault for living where no HOA could leash a man. I didn't blame him. I filed a formal complaint with the Bureau of Land Management, referencing the illegal obstruction of a public access route. Then I followed up with the Wyoming Department of Transportation and requested the maintenance records for parcel 33. Spoiler, there were none. And still, that road remained blocked. It wasn't about safety, and it sure as hell wasn't about aesthetics. It was about pressure, isolation, suburban warfare by passive-aggressive infrastructure. They didn't want me there. But I was. And I wasn't going anywhere. It was 10 days after the barricade went up that I found the envelope wedged in my gate. No postage, no return address, just a name printed on the front in thin black ink, Mr. Broxton. Inside, a formal-looking court notice stamped with the seal of the Goshen County Superior Court. At first, I assumed it was a follow-up to my complaint about the road. Maybe some bureaucrat was finally getting their act together. Then I read the subject line, petition for reversal of private land title and immediate cease of unauthorized development. I laughed, out loud, alone. Just this dry, bitter chuckle like my lungs were made of sawdust. Scout tilted his head at me from under the porch like he couldn't tell if I was losing it or just choking on my coffee. They were suing me. The document, about 20 pages long, claimed that my land had been erroneously released into private ownership due to a clerical oversight, and that the property was historically designated as part of a protected ecological buffer zone adjacent to the Elk Hollow Preserve. The plaintiff, not the county, not the state, not even a federal agency, Elk Hollow Preserve, HOA. They were alleging that my deed was invalid, that my cabin and the new fencing constituted illegal development, and that any further activity would result in both civil penalties and environmental sanctions. Buried deep in the attachment section was an Exhibit B, a digitally signed statement from the county's former surveyor, Randall Hobbs, confirming the zoning error and supporting the HOA's claim. Except Hobbs left the damn country 6 months ago. I know that because I checked his LinkedIn the day they blocked the road. He's in Portugal running a kayak tour company. So, either he had started moonlighting as a remote zoning analyst, or someone had forged a digital signature to support a land grab. But that wasn't all. Later that same afternoon, I received a certified letter from the Wyoming Department of Environmental Protection, marked Urgent Enforcement Notice. It accused me of violating state environmental policy by allegedly engaging in unauthorized deforestation on conservation-adjacent land, and advised that all development, including fencing, plumbing, and road grading, must immediately cease pending investigation. Attached to that letter, a formal complaint filed using my name, my parcel number, and, get this, my own email address. I never sent it. They'd spoofed me, filed a complaint from a dummy account pretending I was reporting myself. The DEP notice didn't shut me down completely, but it locked me into a holding pattern. Any material deliveries were frozen. My construction supply vendor backed out. My solar battery shipment got delayed pending site clearance. Even the local garbage service suddenly claimed they couldn't access the property anymore due to permit issues. It was death by paperwork. Slow suffocation under the weight of artificial red tape. I spent that week bouncing between legal hotlines, clerks, and county records like a goddamn pinball. My internet, sketchy as it was, became my lifeline. I downloaded every land record, permit, regulation, and case precedent I could find. I printed them out, highlighted them until my fingers cramped, and started assembling a paper wall of truth, knowing damn well I'd be throwing it at a system designed to ignore people like me. And if all that wasn't enough, someone started posting anonymous flyers around town, on the gas station bulletin board, in the library, even taped to a post outside the feed store. Bright red letters. Unauthorized development near Elk Hollow, environmental threat or squatter problem. They didn't use my name, but they didn't need to. The town's not that big. People started looking sideways at me. Someone even pulled their business when I tried to order feed. Said they didn't want trouble from the HOA. That's when it hit me. They weren't trying to win in court. They were trying to wear me down, isolate me, make me radioactive, and it was working. I didn't sleep much that week. Kept waking up in the middle of the night with that feeling, like you left the gate open and something slipped in. Scout would lift his head, ears twitching, then settle again. I envied him. I used to sleep like that back when things made sense. When a deed meant ownership and neighbors stayed on their side of the fence. Now I was under siege. Not with guns or pitchforks, but with keyboards, forged files, and zoning codes twisted into weapons, and they'd just fired their biggest shot yet. There's a certain point in a siege when you stop waiting for it to end and start planning your counterattack. For me, that point came around 2 in the morning, after I'd spent 3 sleepless nights sifting through legal documents under a kerosene lamp while Scout snored like a freight train beside the wood stove. I'd had enough. The next morning, I drove into town with a mission. First stop, the county prosecutor's office. Now, I knew I wouldn't get past reception without a fight, especially since I was the subject of what was now, on paper, an active civil land dispute. But I wasn't banking on bureaucracy. I was banking on a name, James Lowry. We'd worked together almost a decade ago, back when I was still with Fish and Wildlife. I'd helped him build a federal case against a fracking outfit that was poisoning elk migration routes with illegal waste pits. We weren't exactly drinking buddies, but we respected each other, and more importantly, we owed each other. The receptionist looked skeptical as hell when I asked for him. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "Tell him it's Calvin Broxton. He'll know." She left. 5 minutes later, James came out himself. He looked the same square jaw, same pinched expression like he'd swallowed a lemon. When he saw me, it softened, just barely. "Well, hell," he said. "You pissed somebody off good, didn't you?" "You don't know the half of it," I said. He took me into his office, closed the door, and I laid it all out. Every fake document, every faked complaint, every trail camera and forged zoning record. I handed him a binder thick enough to kill a man with and watched his expression go from amused to flat-out pissed. "Whoever's doing this," I said, "they forged Hobbs's signature. That's federal." He didn't answer at first. Just flipped through the evidence, lips tight. Finally, he said, "Let me make some calls." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a side office with his IT forensics guy, a wiry little tech named Marcus, who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight since Clinton's first term. I gave him the PDFs I downloaded from the assessor's site, along with screenshots and file metadata. Within 20 minutes, he'd found traces of edit logs, timestamps that didn't match the county system, IP addresses logged to an external server, elkpreservehub.net. "Holy shit," Marcus said, squinting at the screen. "This wasn't done through the county. These entries were injected through a mirror server. Somebody spoofed access and pushed them in as admin-level overrides. That's advanced." "How advanced?" I asked. "Government contractor level. Or a private firm with deep access." James came back in, listened to the summary, and said 3 words I'd been dying to hear. "That's criminal fraud." That night, I drove home with more than just suspicion. I had proof. And I wasn't alone anymore. The next few days were a blur. James opened an internal inquiry with the county registrar and reached out to a contact in the state's attorney general office. Marcus kept digging, tracing IP routes, flagging metadata anomalies, building a forensic chain of custody. Meanwhile, I started preparing for war on another front. A friend of mine from Laramie put me in touch with a young investigative journalist named Sarah Esteban. She was hungry, skeptical, and already 2 weeks deep into a piece about rising corruption in privatized HOA zones across the Mountain West. I invited her out to the ranch. She showed up with a notepad, a camera, and more questions than a grand jury. I walked her through everything. She took photos of the barricades, the phony road signs, even filmed a short video of me standing beside the closed northern access route, holding up the real federal easement map. "I've seen HOA overreach," she said. "But this is straight up land laundering." That term stuck in my head. By the end of the week, Sarah had filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the county to obtain all correspondences between the Elk Hollow HOA and local officials over the past 12 months. James promised to back her if they stonewalled. Marcus gave her a thumb drive of de-identified metadata showing the forged server activity. And me? I started sleeping again. Not well, but better. Still with one eye open, but with both hands building the defense. Scout seemed to feel the shift too. He stuck closer to the gate now, pacing like a soldier on patrol. I rechecked the camera system, recharged the drones, and installed motion sensors at every access point, because deep down, I knew something was coming. And this time, it wouldn't be through paperwork. The first clue came from Scout. It was nearly 1 in the morning, cold enough to frost the window glass, and I was halfway through marking up a zoning map when he started growling low in his throat. Not the bark for fun kind of noise, but the deep, bone vibration kind, an ancient sound dogs make when they smell something they've never liked and never will. I grabbed the thermal scope from the windowsill and scanned the southern fence line. Movement. 4 figures, slow and deliberate, creeping along the outer edge of the property, where the trail splits near the old cattle pen. I adjusted the focus. Each one carried what looked like flashlights or headlamps, maybe a tool belt. One had something bulkier, bolt cutters maybe. They weren't stumbling around like kids. This was methodical, coordinated. I toggled the floodlights. The field lit up like a stadium. The figures froze. Then one stepped forward and raised a megaphone. I cracked the front door just enough to hear him shout, "This is a community oversight inspection authorized under Section 7 of Elk Hollow Preserve Code. You are required to present identification and permit documentation." I had to laugh. They were wearing black jackets with patches that read, "Elk Hollow Community Patrol," like some budget cosplay version of a SWAT team. No uniforms, no badges, just the smug confidence of people who think a clipboard is the same thing as a warrant. "You're on private land," I yelled back. "Turn around, now." No reply. The one with the bolt cutters peeled off toward the east gate. Another aimed what looked like a handheld camera at my cabin. That's when I switched to full lockdown. I triggered the automated camera drones. 4 of them lifted off from the charging station by the barn, buzzing through the night like oversized wasps. The intruders panicked. One ducked, the others scattered. The bolt cutter guy made it to the gate and started working on the lock. I called the sheriff. "This is Broxton. I've got 4 unauthorized individuals attempting forced entry at my southern gate. They're dressed as some kind of rogue HOA patrol. I've got real-time surveillance footage. I need deputies dispatched immediately." "Understood. Units en route," the dispatcher said, calm as a Sunday sermon. Outside, one of the drones hovered above the gate as the would-be commando tried to cut through the lock. I had a camera feed on my phone showing his face up close, sweating, wide-eyed, lit in red infrared like a deer about to become a bumper story. Scout barked once, loud. That was enough to send one of them running back toward the road. The rest didn't make it far. 15 minutes later, 2 sheriff's vehicles came blazing up the ranch road. The high beams washed over the field, catching the patrol dead in their tracks. 2 tried to run. 1 tripped and went down hard. The last guy, the bolt cutter, froze and raised both hands like he'd just remembered how prison works. The deputies were efficient, cuffed 2, detained a 3rd, and gathered up the gear they dropped when they scattered. A knockoff clipboard labeled Inspection Protocol, some night vision goggles, bolt cutters, duct tape, and a printed aerial map of my property with handwritten notes, camera blind spots, gate access priority, and possible livestock distraction. That one chilled me more than I expected. After the scene was cleared, I gave the lead deputy a USB stick with the entire incident recorded from 3 different angles. The drone footage was crystal clear. Names, faces, actions. No room for misunderstandings. "Any idea who they are?" he asked. "Take a wild guess," I said. "They're not my book club." One of the detained men turned out to be Noah Brady, son of the Elk Hollow HOA's legal counsel, Christopher Brady. Small world, isn't it? By sunrise, I was drinking black coffee by the fire, watching local law haul their gear off into evidence bags. One deputy handed me a form to sign and said, "I'm pretty sure this counts as felony trespass, attempted forced entry, and impersonation of a public official. Might even throw in conspiracy. You think they'll actually charge them?" He shrugged. "Someone's going to want to bury this, but the footage makes it hard." I nodded. "Good. Because the footage goes live in an hour." Sarah, the journalist, uploaded the video to her network's YouTube channel at 7 a.m. sharp. She edited it masterfully. Close-up drone shots, audio from my phone call to dispatch, a split screen of me calmly narrating events from my porch while grown men dressed like HOA commandos tripped over tumbleweeds trying to avoid arrest. The headline? When HOAs go militia, Elk Hollow caught in illegal midnight raid on neighboring ranch. The video blew up. By noon, I had offers from 3 national outlets and a podcast invitation from someone named Liberty Dan. People across the country were leaving comments like, "This is why I moved to Alaska," and "Who let the Stepford Wives start a private army?" But I wasn't laughing. This wasn't theater. This was escalation. And someone somewhere in that glass and copper HOA clubhouse was losing control of the narrative. Desperate people do stupid things. And I had a feeling the stupidest was still coming. I thought the raid would be their peak stupidity. Turns out it was just the mask slipping. Within 24 hours of the video going live, the Elk Hollow HOA spiraled from smug silence into full-blown chaos. Their website went offline. Their official email bounced back with a vague, underscheduled maintenance error. And their spokesperson, a guy named Jeremy, who once tried to fine a homeowner for planting non-native geraniums, posted a shaky statement on Nextdoor claiming that the Community Oversight Patrol was not a sanctioned activity. Sure, Jeremy. They just happened to wear matching jackets with the HOA logo and carry official HOA documents by accident. Maybe they picked them up at a garage sale. Sarah's video passed 300,000 views in under 2 days. The footage of the bolt cutter guy panicking under drone lights became a meme before I'd even finished refilling my propane tank. Local papers picked it up, then regional ones. Headlines started using words like vigilante HOA and zoning fraud ring. And that was before the real bombshells dropped. James, the county prosecutor, called me that Friday morning. His tone had changed. Calmer, but harder, like steel that had finally cooled enough to hold an edge. We got the warrant. The sheriff's office raided the Elk Hollow HOA main office that afternoon. I wasn't there for it. I didn't need to be. But from what James told me later, it was a scene straight out of a legal drama. Dozens of files seized. Servers boxed up, laptops, routers, even a fireproof safe pried open and emptied. The HOA president, Heidi Tronger, arrived mid-search in a pearl-white Lexus and tried to claim the warrant was an overreach. According to witnesses, she was politely escorted off the premises when she refused to unlock her phone. A day later, I was called into the prosecutor's office to review evidence. James laid out the results like a blackjack dealer ready to end the game. First up, internal emails between Heidi and the HOA board. Not just the board minutes, they had drafts of strategy memos titled Phase 2, Pressure Response Tactics, and Narrative Reclaim Protocol. Sounded less like a homeowners group and more like a Cold War think tank. They talked openly about removing KB by any legal means or credible emergency, referenced the use of police contacts, and even floated the idea of leveraging fire code violations to get a temporary evacuation order. But the worst, the digital forensics. Marcus had traced the document forgeries, the fake zoning adjustments, the DEP complaint, and the custodial stewardship road filing to a specific device. A desktop workstation inside the HOA office, used by their legal counsel's paralegal. That paralegal, same last name as one of the night raiders. Family business, I guess. The signature of former surveyor Randall Hobbs had been lifted from an old digital property audit, PDF, traced and repasted into a fabricated zoning form. Time-stamped, IP logged, the entire thing stitched together like a bad forgery school project. They had even photoshopped a fake email thread from the Department of the Interior to make it look like the federal auction of my land was in error. The email used Comic Sans. Comic Sans. You'd think if you're trying to fake a federal email, you'd at least go with Arial. Sarah ran a second story that weekend, now with verified records and internal emails. This time, the headline pulled no punches. Documents reveal HOA conspired to fabricate land claims, engineer harassment campaign. National attention followed. A CNN affiliate called, then NBC. Someone from ProPublica asked if I'd go on record. I declined most interviews. I wasn't doing this for attention. I wanted it on record, sure, but I didn't want to be turned into a cause, or worse, a brand. Still, I was invited to a closed-door town council hearing. The room was packed, tense. The mayor, red-faced and visibly sweating, opened with a boilerplate statement about deep concern over recent developments. But what mattered was what came after. James presented the findings publicly, sparing no one. He dropped names, the HOA president, her attorney, a county planning official, and even a city zoning aide who'd accidentally processed the phony documents without verification. It was ugly. Heidi sat in the front row, lips pressed so tight they turned white. She didn't speak. Her lawyer did, a clean-shaven man in a navy suit who said words like allegations, misunderstandings, and process irregularities. It didn't help. The sheriff stood up at the end and announced that arrests were imminent. I walked out of that building into the bright Wyoming sun, dust in my boots, and a half smile under my beard. Not because it was over, not yet, but because they'd finally stopped pretending. It was just after dawn when the convoy rolled in. The sun had barely cracked the horizon, casting long golden lines across the frost-bitten roads of Elk Hollow. A stillness hung in the air, the kind that settles over a place before a storm, even if the clouds haven't yet gathered. The wind carried the scent of pine and dry earth, but underneath it, something else lingered. Anticipation, judgment, the end of something that had gone on far too long. They didn't come with sirens. They didn't need to. 3 sheriff's cruisers moved in formation like chess pieces, followed by a black SUV with federal plates and a matte gray van stenciled with the words Evidence Collection Unit in block letters that seemed to hum with finality. Their engines were low and deliberate, barely louder than the gravel crunching beneath them. No flashing lights, no shouting, just that slow, relentless inevitability. I stood up at the ridge with Scout, coffee in hand, watching the whole thing unfold through the scope mounted on my tripod. 1 mile out, perfect line of sight. The lens caught the glint of metal cuffs before I even registered what was happening. Heidi Tronger, president of the Elk Hollow HOA, queen of bureaucracy, tyrant of trimmed hedges, was being arrested at the wrought iron gates of the community clubhouse. Her blazer was pressed, her hair immaculate, not a strand out of place. She didn't resist, didn't yell, just stared ahead like she couldn't quite believe the world had turned on her. 2 deputies flanked her, cuffing her hands behind her back with the kind of quiet professionalism reserved for delicate targets, like they were restraining a swan that might bite if startled. No force, no theatrics, but the message was clear. Her lawyer arrived 15 minutes too late. Classic. He tried to flash credentials, argue procedural issues. The lead officer didn't even entertain it, just pointed toward the street, then turned his back. By 9 o'clock in the morning, word had spread through town like wildfire in cheatgrass. Texts rolled in from all corners, friends, contractors, city clerks, even the guy at the feed store who once told me to just let it go. One message just said, "She's done." But it wasn't just about Heidi. This wasn't a solo act. This was a full-blown takedown. The charges came down like a hailstorm. 14 criminal counts, forgery of public records, conspiracy to defraud a government entity, unlawful impersonation of a regulatory official, interference with municipal zoning procedures, criminal, trespass with administrative enhancement, and more. The dragnet didn't stop with her. Her co-conspirators took hits too. The HOA's in-house attorney was slapped with obstruction of justice and aiding in the fabrication of official documents. A city zoning aide, someone who'd coincidentally lost my parcel documents, was charged with accepting improper influence and dereliction of duty. Even the paralegal who forged the infamous fake email in Comic Sans, no less, was indicted for willful document fraud. Harsh, maybe, but not undeserved. Later that afternoon, James Lowry, regional DA, held a press conference flanked by 3 state officials and 2 very serious-looking men in gray suits. He stood before the podium like he was reading a sermon, and maybe he was. Each charge was listed slowly, deliberately, as if to burn them into the public record. Sarah, local reporter, sat in the front row. When he finished, she stood and asked the one question everyone had been holding their breath for. What happens to the Elk Hollow HOA now? James looked directly into the cameras, no hesitation. The state is initiating a formal motion to revoke their authority as a homeowners association, pending the outcome of a full forensic investigation. Interim community management will be appointed by the county. Effective immediately, Elk Hollow will no longer be governed by its existing HOA board. The silence that followed was thick. Then came murmurs, then nods. Then, from the back of the room, applause, soft but real, the kind that carried years of resentment and relief. Within a week, things moved fast. The illegal barricades at the North Road, gone. The bogus restricted access signs, confiscated. My parcel officially reaffirmed in my name, clean and clear. Even the Department of Environmental Protection, which had once threatened me with fines, issued a formal apology letter on letterhead, typed in Times New Roman, not Comic Sans, and lifted all activity restrictions. Suddenly, calls got returned. Contractors who had ghosted me were back. My solar battery order was delivered. The fencing crew showed up early, eager even. The garbage service, which had mysteriously stopped weeks ago, resumed without explanation. Like roaches after the light returns. Then the civil ruling came down. The judge ruled in my favor across the board. Title secured, rights restored, civil damages awarded, HOA fined $850,000, most of it set aside for restitution and infrastructure repair. I didn't take a dime of the restitution for myself. Instead, I asked the court to divide it between the county's public records digitization project and a wildlife preservation grant that helps maintain the ridgelines around Elk Hollow. Figure if they wanted to mess with a retired federal agent, the least they could do was fund a few more. As for Heidi, 14 years, no parole before 6. At sentencing, she didn't speak, didn't cry. Just sat there rigid, expression neutral, like it was all happening to someone else. She wasn't the only one in denial. In the weeks that followed, some of the very same residents who once waved HOA newsletters in my face started showing up at my gate. Some brought casseroles, some brought apologies. One guy in cargo shorts and shame handed me a 6-pack of Artisan IPA and muttered, "I didn't vote for her." I looked him square in the eye. "This isn't an election," I said. Then I took the beer. Wyoming hospitality and all. The county assigned an interim administrator to oversee the transition, while a long overdue audit of Elk Hollow's governance began. There was talk of dissolving the HOA entirely. I didn't care one way or the other. I had my land. I had my rights. And finally, I had peace. Not silence born of fear. Not quiet like a loaded gun sitting on a kitchen table. Real quiet. The kind that comes after a storm passes and the trees are still standing. The kind you can breathe in. The kind you can believe in. The kind you fight for.